Hello, everyone. Welcome to Things Invest. We're talking about investing, finance, and professional development. For today's terms only, the investment talk today would be Ethereum ETH. First, just want to say happy Wednesday, everyone, for a great week so far. Respect to recording time of 9:18 a.m. on Eastern time. Ethereum currently trading $3,392, down about 1.12% so far. Respect to overall crypto market is relatively red again, but more in a normalized fashion. With respect to Bitcoin down about 0.83%, Dogecoin down about 2.73%, Cardano same thing respectively, Solana down about 14% so far, XRP down about 15% respectively. So it seems like the sell-off is still durating a little bit with respect to, just how much we have dragged up for the last 1 month and I would say 7 days so far. That whatever goes up really really fast comes down just as fast. It seems like the whales are slowly taking some profit right now, right? Exiting, liquidating their holdings, and with the last jerk, which is basically called the last hurrah, or something that you call the bull trap. Unfortunately, some investors, mainly the public investors, got FOMO'd in and bought in at the last surge right before the huge crash that we saw. Well, not really a crash, but more of a profit taking, like correction for the sake of public investors' money, right? So definitely unfortunate. So before I dive into technical analysis, I'll go through the media affectation first. So I've been reading the news ever since like 6:30 this morning. Some of the news that I've been collecting so far are relatively interesting, more regurgitation news around NFT adoptions, but some interesting news as well that are cultivating from the corporate side of the world as well. So with respect to Fortune 3 hours ago, talk about Siemens Energy CFO on why she became the chief inclusion and diversity officer at the same time. So with respect to this executive who's leading the energy side of the house for Siemens, which is, as we know, is a technological company. She is someone that's also a proponent and advocate for environmental efficacies. And with respect to that, she also has mentioned in previous conferences that she's also an advocate for crypto assets as a whole going forward, despite obviously some environmental concerns that's been cultivating so far. So now she's also, as a woman leader in Silicon Valley, leading a global company. And especially on top of the fact that, with respect to the recent, unfortunate events with the George Floyd incidents and the Asian hate crime, chief and just the inclusion and diversity side of the house, just having racial and gender equality is becoming more and more of an importance in terms of corporate governance, corporate sustainability. Is something that is a necessity, to cultivate, just company morale, and also sustain equality as a whole, knowing the fact that, in the corporate arena, the majority of the C-suite executives are predominantly, Caucasian. So there is, and there are statistics around it, right? About like 85% of C-suite executives are predominantly, Caucasian, with the 15% of the majority of, are typically, Asian or, they're very, few African American representative. And with respect to that cut, only 2% or about like 1.2% out of that pool is women, and at the same time women of color. So it's definitely a slight imbalance, right, if you may. So having her as as a representative to cultivate inclusion and diversity for a global company is definitely a great thing. And also with her support for crypto assets can also drive some gravitas and substantiveness onto the assets going forward, right? And the other one talked about on Bazinga 4 hours ago about Bitcoin Ethereum bull, ARK Invest from Cathie Wood, saying that, with respect to her belief that with the NFT commercializations, with the burn rates, what's the price target Bitcoin and Ethereum will reach to subsequently. And I remember from Cathie Wood in previous conferences, she's talked about that, Bitcoin someday could reach like 500,000 per Bitcoin. And with respect to Ethereum, it could reach close to 12,500 dollars by year end 2022, and someday it could reach about 50K, comparable to like Bitcoin, how it was with the last rally, right? So speculations, and it seems like they do have specialists or analysts that are specifically doing research on the corporate adoptions and the burn rates going forward. So it's informative, but ultimately just more speculative in a more of a financial engineering perspective, right? But I do believe in ARK Invest investment thesis and value proposition. She is a woman that is have a lot of great substance with her years of experience at AllianceBernstein, subsequently start her own fund. She's definitely someone that I respect highly in terms of like her investment opinions and et cetera, et cetera. So but ultimately something that is more of a speculation based on research. So something good to know, right? And with respect to other news on Bitcoin, that's 8 hours ago, talk about Christie's, which is an auction house, to auction art blocks NFT with Ethereum bidding. So we know that Christie's, have announced about like 7, 8 months ago that they start to accept Bitcoin as a form of payments in transactions. It seems like they're now also utilizing Ethereum as well for the bidding processes, for these obviously the NFT blocks that they're auctioning, knowing the fact with the recent commercializations and popularization, if you may, right? And the next one is really talking about Solana, with respect to the surge that it had experienced yesterday, despite the overall crypto market correction, right? Basically, this is talking about on Bazinga about 8, 9 hours ago. Is this a Ethereum killer, right? And what is the long-term value propositions for this? So another just position news regurgitating on comparing the two, if you may. So it's informative, but more of a speculations, if you may, on. And also at the same time, we have to take that with a grain of salt because these are typically persuasive news that the author has a specific incentive around it. So good to know, but is it something that you want to completely follow? I would kind of, read that with a grain of salt, if you may, right? And then the other one, this is old news again, with respect to the El Salvador's first days of adoptions coincides with crypto corrections or crypto crash. It seems like they're screaming the word crash. I mean, something that's not a crash. It's something that we've foreseen, right? The technical analysis was very, very overstretched. It was more of a correction, right? So another regurgitation news, and then other news like really talking about just like how much is crash and is it going to keep crashing, things like that. So more just old regurgitation news. So let's talk about more live news, right? So with respect to the technical analysis right now, we know that we are below the substantive level, the 3,472. Technically, that's the next level. Or I would just give it like a flat number, like 3,450. And we broke that. We are $25 below it, and we opened below it as well. Also, on top of the fact that MACD is crossed, so we have this death cross going right now. However, the RSI is more of a normalized mid-level, so we are not going to be like crashing completely all the way to like the 1750 again. But the likelihood of actually going back down to the 3,000 would be very likely. And I think we tried to do that earlier today. We tried to get to the 3,210. Well, technically the 3,150, which is a substantive level. If you look at the chart, right, we have relatively good amount of platforms that we've been forming so far, right? But with respect to this cross section, we just formed recently, so that means we have more selling pressure coming because the ball needs to kind of roll down with this inertia, and then slowly scoop up as we hit that bottom, right? And I think the bottom is in the near sight. I would say 3,000 first, 2,750, 2,450, right? And these are the levels I would potentially buy at, right? And I think it makes sense, right? I think by the time we hit all the way to 2,750, I think the RSI should be around like the 40s. And once we get to the 2,450, we should be way below and we'll be basically back on ground. Basically started where we started at when we were at the B Word Summit or after the B Word Summit. And then we had like just like consecutive of a month and a half of positive news, right? And it was really, really interesting to see just how many positive news that we're having on a daily basis, like 12 collectively, right? So I think today we might see a little bit of a rebound, right? Because of the massive sell-off that we have yesterday. But that's really mainly driven by public investors, not the whales, right? Ultimately, what's really going to be driving the price is really the whales that have the largest market influence. Ultimately, public investors are just small money, right? We don't have a lot of dollars to influence the market. So would I be buying today? I think logically, if you're buying the 3,450, that's a logical level because that's a substantive level. But the real level is really the 3,150, which is more substantive. So I would buy at that level when we hit that level. But for me, I'll still have 55 Ethereum. So once we hit the 3,000, I might chip in a little bit. Once we hit the 2,750, I'll chip a lot more in. Once we hit the 2,450, I will chip significantly more in, right? So taking a look at cheat sheet real quick, just to keep ourselves grounded, right? So remember, we were at the complacency stage. We had the last hurrah, which is the reason why we pumped up to the 4,000, but not all the way to the obviously the all-time high. And subsequently, we had that sell-off, which we saw yesterday across the whole crypto market. And the next thing would not be another complacency stage, where we will see more anxiety, denial, and panic. But it wouldn't be happening that drastic fashion, right? It wouldn't be that prompt. You'll see that we will consolidate on a sideways fashion, right? You start to think like, oh God, are we not moving on a sideways fashion again? We're just gonna be consolidating. It will look very much like a complacency stage, right? But once we get there, we might see a lost hurrah again, right? Another secondary hurrah, and then we'll drop all the way to denial, then panic and capitulation, and then the cycle begins again, right? You need to go through the oscillation. It's just a normal course of cadence, right? So with respect to the bottoms, right, I think 2,750, 2,450 would technically be the bottoms, right, based on how the MACD and RSI is set up right now. But I think it makes sense and it's a wise decision to start incurring some risk at the 3,000, right? And if you bought at 4,000, don't worry about it. It is what it is, right? Just hold for a long term, because ultimately you'll get to these levels from here, right? And I think next year by summertime, let's say August next year again, I think we should hit somewhere close to about like $10,000, right? Which is 3.3 times your money if you bought that $3,000 level, right? So hopefully this is helpful, and hope you guys had a great rest of the Wednesday and great rest of the week. And you'll probably see me again for the second video later today. But really appreciate you, and stay tuned for this to come up. Take care. Bye.